All right, I want to start with Lia. Lia, what did you bring?
Whoa, I got a yummy pie cookie
Pie.
from
Okay.
Costco.
Pie from Costco. Oh, Costco's always good. And Shruthi, what did you bring?
Something very different. I brought a picture, not
Ooh.
food, but now I wish I brought food.
Well, I think Leah should send us food.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I'll give you my address. Just ship me some pie for some cakes.
Go to Costco run. Well, we can already see it's a little it's an interesting dynamic today on the podcast. Not quite strangers. Welcome everyone. My name is Valerie Hope. I'm your host. And the purpose of this podcast is to help bring two people together who do not know each other. And by having a conversation, inspire curiosity, build connection, and also disrupt the status quo. And today I have the fortune of bringing two ladies that I've known because of my involvement in Toastmasters here in the Dallas, Texas area. And I'm going to start off by introducing Lia. Lia, you and I have known each other almost a year, I believe, more or less.
About a little bit longer because your involvement in the area and also direct into our club.
Yes. So a little over a year. And I remember you and I having several conversations. We only met in person one time.
Right.
We met up for a little smoothie or coffee or something a couple months ago. So, and you told me some things that you were shifting about your speaking, the focus that you wanted to have in your speaking now being humor, and you're doing comedy shows. And when you shared all of that, I was like, oh my goodness, Lia, you got to be on my podcast, because you had some very interesting takes about what you're doing and why. And then I thought, who might Lia meet that could have an interesting conversation about humor and comedy? And immediately I was like, ding, 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 Shruthi Garimalla, because Shruthi, you also were in one of the Toastmasters clubs that I supported last year as an area director. And you have a background in stand-up comedy.
Ooh. I like that you said background in stand-up comedy. That makes me seem so professional.
Because you are.
Thank you. I'll take it. Yeah.
It's fantastic because I don't think I know someone personally. I did actually date a guy that was a stand-up comedian for a little while. It was not Trevor Noah. But I didn't get to know that much about it, but I was like, ooh, Shruthi might be a great conversation to have. Might be a great place to start and have a conversation with Lia about humor, because Shruthi, I know with you and your background in computer science, you're a student in college and you're working on your career. And I'm like, oh, it's got to be really fascinating to think about, where does comedy and humor fit for you and how did you get there? Yeah. And this was a dream matchup for me. So thank you both for saying yes.
Of course, I'm super excited to be here.
I'm curious, why did you two say yes to meeting relative strangers? Because you've never met each other, although all three of us are part of the same organization. Why did you say yes?
I love meeting people. I find enjoyment around being new people. But more than that, when you called me and you were like, this is my podcast and this is what I'm doing, I was like, I loved it immediately. The idea of like talking about something that I'm very, very passionate about, getting my voice out there and saying like, this is why I like comedy. And this is like the actual benefits of comedy, because people honestly look at comedians and humor and just think it's like lighthearted and fun. So I was really excited by the idea of saying like, humor is so much more than just lighthearted fun. And the idea of doing that with someone that I've never met and maybe seeing like, oh, do we relate on like what our idea of humor is, or are we completely different? I would love to see a totally different point of view. You know, it was very intriguing to me.
Cool. Lia, what about you?
Well, because you asked.
Thank you.
I trust you, right? If it's ABC on the street asking me to meet with a stranger, I might not say yes. But to answer your question, actually, when you want to ask you about why are you doing this, podcast, is I also have a personal mission is to meet new people who are different from me. And because that's how you grow. And we live in America. It's a huge country with people from diverse culture. If you miss that, you are missing your opportunity to learn something new from others. So same mentality. That's why I say yes.
Oh, you're speaking my language, Lia. Yes.
That's why we are your friend, right?
Well, so not only, so you two have that in common, but I do want to call out the fact that both of you come from different backgrounds culturally. And
Yep.
so Lia, your background is?
Well, I have lived in Texas for more than 20 years now, right? But I came from China originally as a foreign student. So I was a native Chinese.
Mm-hmm. What part of China, Lia?
The hometown of a giant panda, the cute one, and the spicy food. Sichuan. You know, when you heard people say this is Sichuan food, Sichuan is Sichuan province. That's the name of the province. I live in the capital state of Sichuan called Chengdu.
Chengdu, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating. Like
So if you like a spicy food, you need to travel with me to Chengdu.
Oh, yes, please.
Yes, okay. I pack you next time after the pandemic's over. Right now, I even cannot go back there to see my mom.
Oh, no worries. We'll go. And Shruthi looks like she's down for that too. So
I'm very down. I'm vegetarian, but I mean, I'm sure I can find something.
Oh, they know how to cook vegetables. There.
Yes. Oh,
I'm very interested.
And you like tofu, you know, very healthy. Yeah.
Very nice. Shruthi, what about for you? Your background?
So I'm born and raised in America, but my family's all from India, 100% just Indian. But yeah, I've lived in America my whole life, but I have a lot of ties to Indian culture. I love being Indian. It's like one of my like main personality traits. It's like, I'm Indian. People are like, we know.
What have you been in Texas the whole time, or?
No, so I was born and raised in Illinois, and I moved out to Texas, I think almost like 8 years ago, something like that. It was right before I was in 8th grade. So I've been here for a while, and I've definitely, you know, like I call Texas home. If someone asks me like, you know, oh, where do you live? Like, I'm a Texan. I say y'all, you know, I've been to Buc-ee's. I think I'm a true-blooded Texan at this point.
Those are the two criteria. Can you say y'all and go to Buc-ee's?
I've been to Whataburger.
I got that Whataburger. Yep. I've been in
Whataburger.
What else
is
is there to be a
thing,
Texan?
Right? Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, fantastic. So just that was just kind of a setting of the stage and getting a little bit about your background. But I want to go back to the original connection point, which is humor and comedy. And I asked you both to share an object that has some meaning and relevance to that. So let's start with Lia. You brought a pie. So tell us about our Costco pie here.
Well, you know, I'm on a intermediate fast. That means I don't eat until 12 noon. And I will stop eating after 6 p.m. So this is a reward. I want to eat as much as I can between the window I can eat. So which is a cheating. So that's the fun part. But before the meeting, I brought this. I said, should I try something? But what if I have something stuck into my teeth? That's not very good for the podcast. So I stopped eating. So that's the story of this pie sitting here, not doing any contribution to me.
Wait. So when I asked you to bring something relevant to comedy and humor, your thought was, I'm going to be breaking my fast around the time of the podcast, so I should have my pie handy. Did you eat all of it?
No, I didn't touch it because I don't think it's professional.
Oh, you didn't want to have, okay.
Right, anything on my teeth. Because when you eat pies, anything can happen. I
promise you, Shruthi and I will let you know if you have anything in your teeth. If you want to take a bite.
You know, I had a pretty relative, decent lunch. This is just cheating part. So
that's a dessert. Good. Okay. All right. So it'll be a reward for after the podcast.
Yes, I will enjoy that after, we turn off everything.
Fair enough. All right. Shruthi, what about for you? You brought a picture. Tell us about it. I got a
picture. So in this picture, it is my mom, my brother, my cousin, and I when we're all much younger. And I chose this photo because the three of them are just sitting there smiling, and I'm just over here like this. I just think it's funny that I found this photo randomly the other day. And I looked at it and I sent it in my family group chat, and they were like, yeah, 10 years later, nothing's changed. like nothing. This is a random photo. And I just think it's funny that like, I've always just tried to like steal the spotlight and try to be funny my entire life. I was like, this is somewhat relevant.
That's excellent. So stealing the spotlight and being goofy is your thing.
With my family.
Oh, but wait, you have a background in comedy now. So hello.
Stealing the
that's
spotlight
the
is
foundation,
the family.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make myself look better here. I promise I don't steal the spotlight from my friends or anything. Just kidding.
No worries. We are all sharing the spotlight right now.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
I want to get into the humor and comedy piece. So Lia, you really inspired this for me when you started sharing about your shift out of Toastmasters into your next I don't know, phase, career path. I'm not sure how you want to describe it, but tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I had been a Toastmaster member for 10 years. I joined in the winter of 2009. I remember that. And when I had a big dream to become a professional speaker. So I was very thankful for my experience at Toastmaster, where helped me to build my confidence as a speaker. As how I view Toastmaster, I think is a university. No matter how good the university is, you need to graduate and to test your skills in the real world. And for me, as a speaker, the biggest challenge for me is to find my niche. When people ask me, what do you speak about? Valerie, your topic is leadership, right? My topic is I position myself as an expert on diversity and the communication. But I found out that is from the client's perspective, they say, if I need a speaker to talk about communication, they say, hey, what can you teach us? I say, I help people, global leaders, to improve their communication skills. Then the question come back to me is, why should we hire you? We can hire a native speaker, a blonde, perfect white lady, or a professor from SMU. So I need to have something unique about myself to separate myself from other speakers. This is true in the marketplace, right? So I was looking for the niche. And when one of the potential clients challenged me, say, hey, why should I hire you? And we have a trainer in-house. They can train perfectly, our staff. I was thinking, am I a trainer? I'm not. Who am I? I said, I'm a performing artist. And as an artist, what's unique about you? Like a singer, right? Then I, tracing back to my experience in the deep valley of my career. I worked as a banker for a huge financial institution for 5 years. And that career was not going anywhere. Bankers do not make much money. And in the bank with the very structured, categories, it's pretty hard to get a promotion to the headquarters for, marketing role, because I have a background in marketing, but they just don't give the opportunity. And I'm not a perfect banker. As a banker, to be successful, you have to be hungry and aggressive. Hey, Valerie, where's your money? How can I bring your money to our bank for investment? I'm a talker. I enjoy talking with my customers. And it was my customers and my coworkers, even my bank branch manager told me, say, hey, Lia, you're funny. I said, am I funny? I didn't know that. Even I compete at Toastmasters for humor speech contests, I never really win beyond an area, because Toastmasters have a certain expectation, a structure or judgment, right? And the way Toastmasters teach us to, write humor speech is also limited the way I express myself. So in June this year, very recently, and I feel like I'm no longer learning anything new. Nothing complain about Toastmaster. But if you are not learning anything new as a student, no matter how great the university is, Harvard, Stanford, it's time for you to leave. So I left. And after I left, I was lost. I say, I have reached the break ball in my world. What should I do next? I say, okay, maybe I just randomly do some search to learn something about comedy, because I did comedy before the pandemic, had a very successful, solo show by myself, 30 minutes with a group of white ladies. That was not my typical, audience. I thought that was I know I belong to people. Maybe not the typical corporate world they were asking for, why should I hire you? But I belong to people I can connect, like my customer at the bank. So with that motivation, I started doing a little bit research online. I randomly found a guy's teaching course about how to write comedy. But the so-called write is totally different write. While we learn about write, and they say, as a comedian, you don't write your comedy materials, you speak. And I learned a great deal from his short courses. I'm a pretty cheap person. I normally don't pay money to buy online courses. But when I, went through his, free lessons with what he was teaching, so I paid the money and I went through the course. Hula, it was eye-opening for me. I learned a couple major things. First of all, and he said, if you are a female Asian, if you do right, that can become your advantage as a comedian.
A disadvantage or your advantage?
Advantage.
Advantage.
Because not many Asian female ladies doing that, right? Second part, which I had a misconception about comedians. I thought to be famous, you have to be dirty, right? Talking dirty, all those gross stuff, which was wrong. You can be a clean comedian and still have fun and still make a career. Actually, you will be more attractive if you are a clean comedian. I said, okay, that fits my value because I don't want to become dirty in order to become famous. That's not who I am. And the last part is I share with him my review and the video I record with the comedy show I did with those white ladies, about 50 of them. He sent back to me, he said, Lia, you have a natural talent. You just need a stage time to polish yourself. So that gave me the confidence to really dive into the comedy of art. And the show, I shared with you yesterday was my first public show after the pandemic.
That was your first public show?
Yeah. Okay. I've never done that before.
Wow. Shruthi, did you go?
I was not able to go, but was it, I hope clearly it sounds like everything went great.
Yeah. Well, and I just finishing the story till now, and I share with you about the show more. And it was a kind of test for myself to get myself out there, is to see something, do something that was impossible. And I can relax today now. I was stressed out, not because of my performance. And I also have like 3 other comedians. We do the show together. I know we can take care of the guests. The biggest concern came from the theater. You have to sell your tickets, right? It would be very, very bummer if you have an empty theater for your comedy show.
Yeah.
And the second part, the challenge came from, I got a lot of my Asian community to support me. A lot of Chinese friends came to my show, which was great. But you know what? That was the first time I ever invited my own people to my show. Why? Because in the science of laughing, there are several types of people you should try to avoid. One is all male audience, because males don't laugh unless they are with their ladies. That's one. Second part is try to avoid people who are very good with logistic thinking and analytic skills. All my friends belong, most of them, IT, engineer, accounting. So I wasn't sure we can make them laugh, but they were great last night. So I think it was a great challenge for me. I'm glad I did it. When I'm going to do that next time, I'm not sure, but I'm going to keep searching and diving into the comedy art, learn the art, become better and better, and actually bring comedy back to my keynote speech to give me a competitive advantage. If you are funny, you can add value, inspire people, you have more to offer to the marketplace. So that's my long story short.
Ooh, wow. Thank you,
Story.
Lia. Well, Shruthi, I saw you react a few times. So I'm curious, first of all, before we hear your version, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you're thinking as Lia was sharing her shift, her pivot.
I was seeing actually a lot of similarities, because for me, it wasn't as much of a pivot moment. For me, it was more of like a few realizations over my life, because I'm still like pretty young, you know, like I'm in college. And so rather than having like that one big shift that I think you had, Lia, I was just sort of like sitting there and I'm like, wow, like we really are two very different people, but like our experiences and like our feelings surrounding certain events and like comedy in general are so similar, despite us being two completely different backgrounds, two completely different ages. I'm like, wow, I relate a lot to that.
Say more about that, Shruthi. What
so,
was it that your experience? Yeah.
Like specifically being like a woman and doing comedy, that's like a big thing for me, because unfortunately one of the biggest like compliments I ever get is, you're really funny for a woman. And I'm like, why are you putting that for a woman there? Why, like, what is the point of that? You can leave it at, you're very funny. But I think like how Leo was saying, like never have an all male audience because they won't laugh. It's because like there is that sense of ego there. That's their sense of like, then no woman could be so funny. And it's like, yeah, because we're people. We are more than just our gender. We're people with the experiences and the ability to speak. I don't know why this is a shocker to you, like, but that's one of those things that really, really gets to me and really, really irks me. But like I wish it wasn't like that. And I think that's like a big reason for me wanting to get into comedy, is like, you know, like I just want to be known like as a funny person, not as a funny woman. And also you were saying about how like you know, you just like talking is a big thing for you. You're not as like aggressive as like maybe, you know, other people would need to be in certain professions. And I'm the exact same. I'm such a non-confrontational person. Like I literally I avoid conflict at any given time, but I love talking. I think I'm actually a very good talker. You know, like from a young age, my friends would come up to me being like, I'm in distress, help. And I never really understood why they would come to me. But like, as I've gotten older, I realized it's because like, I'm good at like very like, you know, vocalizing my thoughts and like, you know, saying what needs to be said at the right time in the right way. And I think that's why comedy has been like, I don't want to say easy, but it's come a little bit more naturally to me, because I think I'm able to like shift my, you know, focus from, okay, I need to be stern and strict at this moment, to I can have a little bit more fun with what I'm saying, or okay, we need to dial it back down very quickly. So yeah, I relate to you on that. Was another thing I related to you. I was like, yeah, I can't be aggressive with someone. I cannot. I should not get into a profession where I have to be aggressive with people, because it's not going to end well for me. But yeah, and so for me, like I don't think I can say a true moment where I like started doing comedy, like where I started becoming a comedian. It was more like, you know, I guess I'm just gonna get into my like little my life story. But so they say that comedy like comes from a dark place, right? And like I was a very overweight kid. I was bullied a lot growing up, and it really sucked. And you know, I definitely got into a dark place. But I remember as a kid thinking to myself, like, if people are gonna call me funny looking, I'm at least gonna be funny. And I said that, and people laughed. And I was like, are they laughing at me? And someone was like, no, we're laughing with you, Shruthi. That was a really funny thing to say. And I found so much joy in the fact that I made other people laugh. And I was like a kid when I said this. And I realized just like over time, I was like, making other people laugh makes me feel better. You know, like I really enjoy that. And then when I was in high school, in theater class, we had to write a monologue for like an assignment. I went up to my teacher and I was like, can I just try doing this like almost like a stand-up style? And she was like, that's going to be difficult, Shruthi. I don't know if you're going to be able to do this, but if it's your grade, I'm still going to grade you on the same rubric. And I was like, okay. So I did. And I ended up getting 100 on that. And she came up to me and she was like, wow, I am astonished. Absolutely, like truly astonished that you did that. And she was like, you have a real talent for comedy, Shruthi. You know, she's like, comedy is not easy. Comedy is not the type of thing that you can just do. like you have a knack for it, do it. Like also in high school, I was in speech and debate, and my event was humorous interpretation, which is like, I basically was like, you have 10 minutes to do a comedic play on your own. You have to do all the characters, different voices, no props. I ended up going to nationals for that. Yeah. So I've always just had this little knack for comedy, and I've always like, I find joy in making other people laugh. So it sort of like worked together very well. Like, yeah, it comes from a dark place. It comes from me being bullied for like pretty much my entire life, but I found a way to spin it into something much more positive. I found a way to use it to help other people and help myself. So that's where I think like like humor and comedy is like such a useful tool. And I like want more people to explore that. And I want more people to be aware of that and, you know, understand that, you know, if like, you know, if you don't know what to do, try being funny. I know that sounds so dumb, but like try it, because you'd be surprised that like, if you open yourself up a little bit, if, you know, if you really try, I think everybody's actually like has a little comedian inside of them. It's just whether you're willing to like let it shine or not.
It takes a little courage.
It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage.
You know, you said something that the final sentence was so true. Everyone have a little comedian inside. It's up to you how much you want to let that thing come out. You don't have to become a professional comedian, which is a very challenging, tough career to make a living. Okay. But if you have the courage to share that with other people, the funny side of you brings humor and the positivity to life, you can make yourself more likable. And if you're a leader in a workplace, and you probably will be a better leader. You know, humor is one of the top attribute for a leader, you know, beyond hardworking. And so that's very, very true. It's just, how can we tell people, hey, be funnier? I said, no, I'm not funny.
Everyone's always like, yeah, like, I wish I could be funny, Shruthi. I just can't do it. And I'm like, but you can. The perfect example.
It's kind of like with love and expression, because I think what you guys are pointing to is that humor is a level of self-expression and ease in one's self-expression. We all have a little comedian, but we all tend to have our own defense mechanisms to hide or protect certain aspects of who we are and how we are. Some people use humor as a weapon, or use humor as a defense mechanism, right? When they have, you know, they want to cut through. I remember a few weeks ago, my brothers, and I have 3 brothers, I'm the only girl, we had a little Zoom gathering with our dad. Our dad used to be super strict when we were growing up and kind of angry with us. So sometimes he'd yell and raise his voice, and all of us were super intimidated growing up. But over time, you know, all of us now are in our 40s, and we were just kind of like, well, you know how dad was. But what was so funny is, because now my dad has warmed up considerably, we were having this really fun conversation about, you remember when you told us XYZ, and there was something that like freaked us out because you know, your voice or your facial expression. And we laughed so hard throughout that conversation. What was funny is to realize that all of us use humor as a means to release tension. Because when we were young, especially, we felt like, oh my gosh, there's so much tension in the house. And my dad was upset about something, or if somebody got in trouble about something, that was our way to look out for each other, to lighten things up. And then the other piece was also to just stay sane, just like to stay. It was like a wellness thing, a well-being issue. So for us, being funny or being humorous came very naturally. I'm actually taking a course on humor. You guys will be proud of me. This whole week, I've been studying for this podcast. You know, I feel like I've been cramming. There's a book called Humor Seriously. So I think that, back to what you were saying, Lia, this is about how to teach leaders how to incorporate humor, just really just lightening up. It's not about being funny on purpose, but not taking ourselves so seriously, not taking the things and the stresses of life so seriously, is finding a lightness. And I had to do an assessment as part of this course. So I had to send out to my friends and close friends, only send it to a handful of people, an assessment on my humor. And so I sent it to different people. And what I got back essentially was that people did think I'm funny, but they found that the kind of humor that I use tends to be more in observational humor, situational humor. Is not like it's not like quips and jokes and one-liners, and is not necessarily to hurt or to criticize, or I'm not a very sarcastic humorist, right? I try to make fun of the things that are happening in the moment. But it was really fascinating to hear other people describe what I did in being funny, because I'm like, I don't think I've ever analyzed that. So I'm curious about what you guys think is funny though. Like what makes you laugh and what makes you say something humorous? If you could analyze that, what would it be?
Well, I think comedy is not purely, but I think a major factor of comedy is timing. Like you got to get that timing right, otherwise your jokes won't land. So like I don't have a specific thing that makes me laugh. Like I don't have like, oh, this is like a really funny thing to me. It'll be like really anything can make me laugh, like as long as it's delivered properly. Like I think you were saying like your dad growing up was like very strict. My mom, she's like a very like honest person, a little brutally honest sometimes. I don't really remember her being funny growing up, but like off late she'll just say something at the perfect time and I will like break down, like cry laughing, and I'm like, when did mom get funny? When did this happen? And both me and my brother are like, what's going on here? And she was like, I don't know, Shruthi's funny. I've been watching her for some time and trying to pick up on what she does. Wow. And I'm like, timing is it. Like if you can deliver something properly, I will laugh. I'm very easy to make laugh.
That's interesting. I think so did your mom change her delivery, or did you and your brother start listening to her differently?
No, she changed her delivery. She was literally like, I kind of like have been picking up on what Shruthi's been doing recently and like trying to become a little funnier. She's like, you guys think I'm just so strict and so mean. And I'm like, because you are, but you're also funny, apparently.
Lia, what about for you? What makes you laugh, or what brings out your funny?
I think that came from your life. Okay. And funny can be in written verbs, but a lot of the time can be how you express yourself. Just like Shruth was talking about, can be non-verb and the verb. Silence, your facial expression, and your gestures that can make you funny. And the funny part is, what's funny to American may not be funny to Chinese. See, I didn't grow up in this country. When I was first doing comedy, my biggest fear was, something, I think funny. I don't know about those white ladies, what's their reaction will be, right?
Those poor white ladies. You and all the white ladies.
I purposely met a lot of non-Chinese friends. A lot of them are white ladies. But
you gotta get some other people of color in there too. Maybe that'll expand.
I know. The secret is, as a human being, we share more in common than our differences.
Cheers.
If you talk about your structure, your struggles, your mistakes, your embarrassing moment, or parenting, challenges, everyone can relate to that. Let me give you one simple example. That's just happen on a daily basis. And one of my experience was I was walking my dog in the morning, and I bumped into a young dad. He was walking his dog, and while he was pushing a stroller with two young babies there. They were only 6 months old. One boy, one girl. They were so cute and adorable. So suddenly at that moment, I had a thought. I said, I want to offer that young dad a free babysitting so I can smell their babies. You might think I'm creepy, right? But I said, you don't understand. My daughter used to be cute and adorable. Now I have to ask for her permission before I kiss and hug her. She's a teenager. Mm-hmm. So the final one is the punchline. So the funny part is all your expression, how you think, you see something, your personal reflection, and how you express that. That's the combination of comedy. So there's no one word say what's funny, what's not. You just express what you think is interesting, what amazing you, then the audience respond to your expression. And kill or not kill, you cannot control. You might impress one group. Tomorrow, when you try to entertain a group of men, they might not laughing at all. You just have to keep trying. That's my experience.
That is probably the most difficult part about comedy is like you have to come to the acceptance that not everyone's going to find you funny. Not every joke you make is going to land every time. Because I've like made jokes before that are like so funny. I think I'm like the funniest person in the world. My friends are laughing their butts off. Like it's a good time. And then I'll make that same joke at another place. Everyone's laughing. It's a good time. I'll make the same joke. Everything's the exact same to a whole new audience. And people are like, that's not really funny, Shruthi. And I'm like, what? It was funny to everybody else. It was funny to me. What do you mean it's not funny to you? And that's like the brutal part is like when you think that you're like, oh, everyone's going to love this. Everyone's going to love this. And then some people just don't like it. It's not their humor. It's not for them. And that was like a big part of me, like when I started to get into like actually writing some bits, you know, and like getting my like material put together was, you know, I was like a lot of mine like material comes from being like a South Asian woman growing up in America. Cause I think there's a lot to be said there. It's like, it's a weirdly relatable experience for a lot of people, but you know, I'm like, so I wrote like the first part and I was basically just talking about like how like, this is what I am. I'm like South Asian. And people like, you know, my like non-South Asian friends were like, I mean, I don't get it. Like, I guess it works for you. And I was like, okay, this is very much a niche and I need to like broaden it a little bit. So I started making fun of everybody else and they were like my South Asian friends were like, yeah, Shruthi, like that doesn't really apply though. Like we don't really care for that. And I was like, how do I appease everyone? How do I please everyone? I can't just make fun of being South Asian. I can't just not make fun of being South Asian. I don't know what to do here. And I realized I'm not going to please everyone. So I just wrote what I thought was funny. And then it's turned out a lot of people didn't matter their ethnic background. Were like, yeah, that's funny. Like surprisingly relatable. If you just look past it being about me, the content was actually pretty like universally experienced. So when you stop caring about everyone liking about your jokes, I think it takes your humor up a level.
You know, you guys both said something that reflects exactly what I experienced when I went to see Trevor Noah and Hassan Minhaj. One, Lia, Trevor said exactly the same thing you said. So I wonder if like, maybe you guys are friends, because one of the things he said is we have a lot more in common than we often think we do. But he said, most people don't connect because we you know, when we start a conversation, you don't make friends because you all of a sudden decide you're going to share what are your political views and what are my political views, or how do you think, you know, what do you think about the vaccine, or, you know, things like that. Those are not the topics that you want to start off in building a relationship. But if you really think about the human experience, like you said, we all cry. If, you know, we've all had parents, we've all had a childhood. Like if you think about all the human experiences, that's what draws people together. So that was the first thing. And the second thing that came to mind was that both of those comedians, I went live. They're both my celebrity crushes. So I had to go. There was no way that I couldn't. And it was back to back. One night, Trevor, one night. Well, I went to see their show. I didn't like see them, but I went to see their show back to back. And what was fascinating is the crowd was absolutely mixed. There were a lot of people from everywhere. Trevor Noah's crowd, for example, there were Americans, there were Africans, there were Asians, there were Latinos, you name it. I mean, as far as you could see, and some of the languages I heard, amazing. Middle Eastern, it was fantastic. With Hassan's crowd, I would say perhaps the majority was Indian or South Asian. And I think, you know, there was also Middle Eastern in there, he's Muslim. But what was so fascinating with their styles of humor, I laughed my head off with Trevor Noah. I mean, I walked away with a humor hangover because I was just like, my head hurt, my cheeks were burning.
But laughing too hard, right?
I was laughing almost the entire show. He was hilarious. He had serious moments, but he was definitely hilarious. Hassan made me think, though. Hassan's humor, he was like a professor. He's like that professor whose classes sell out because he's very edgy. He has a lot of conviction in his opinions. He pushes the envelope, but not in ways that are inappropriate or gross or offensive. I mean, he had some blue moments, right? Some kind of sexual humor and innuendo. But for the most part, he took us to the edge a lot on his opinions, but then he was surprisingly intimate. He shared a lot about his feelings being a father, about trying to get pregnant with his wife, like all of this stuff, very intimate moments. But what I thought was interesting, and I wonder if it has something to do with this, Lia, I want to get your take on this. With Trevor, they asked us not to record, no audio or video recordings of the program. So we could take pictures. We could still have our phones and take photographs, which I did. With Hassan's show, they actually locked our mobile devices, including watches, in a little pouch that you could take with you, but it was locked until you walked out of the building. So there was no recording, no pictures, nothing while we were watching the show. And he did make a comment during the show about like trusting the audience. He goes, I know we have your phones, but we locked your phones, but we trust you. But one of the things that he mentioned is this allowed him to say things that he may not be able to say if he were going to be recorded, because the context would be different. There's something else for like, oh, Shruthi saw Hassan and she said XYZ, he said XYZ. It wouldn't have the same meaning or the same impact as you showing a recording of him saying XYZ and then people making a big story about it without the context. Anyway, so I just wanted to get your take on that, because both of their styles of humor are so different. With Hassan, I had like more emotional roller coaster. There was like almost shed a tear at one point, anger, like frustration, and then also very funny. With Trevor, it was mostly funny and eye-opening. And he has some eye-opening moments too, but I know Hassan comes in hot. Oh, and one last thing I'll say, and Shruthi, you reminded me of this. He said one of the first punchlines he landed, which made him decide to become a comedian, was a moment where they'd call the police on him and a few friends. There was somebody that was pretending to, well, not pretending, but they were inserted themselves into his friend group, pretending to be interested in converting to Islam, but apparently he was some sort of agent or something. This was like during the Patriot Act days. And apparently someone called the police because of they overheard Hassan say something. And he said the police had taken them, slammed them across the hood of the car and started asking him questions. And a friend came by and she was like, Hassan, what's wrong? Are you dealing drugs? He's like, no, I'm dealing terrorism. And everybody starts to laugh. And he's like, I'm funny. And apparently that was like the joke that put his career on track. Into motion. So yeah, but I'm curious about you guys. Who do you find funny, or maybe some of the comments that I just made about those two particular comedians and what they attract? They do attract a very diverse crowd.
No, what you said about Hassan Minhaj is like it's like the reason I think that he is like probably one of my like favorite comedians. Like he and John Mulaney, I think, do a very good job of using humor to talk about serious subjects. I think they do it in very different ways. Like their comedic styles are completely different, but that's the type of comedian I want to be, like talking about very real issues and, just things that are happening in the world, things that have happened in their life. Like John Mulaney has like, on multiple occasions talked about his struggles with, drug addiction and things like that in a very funny way. Like, I think you have done your job, at least for me personally. Like, I think that you have done your job well as a comedian if when your audience leaves, they leave with, wait a second, which is like clearly what you had. You clearly said like, it got me thinking. Yeah. Like in the moment, you can have a good time. You can just laugh. It can be easy. It can be fun. But as long as you're like thinking about the messages after the fact, that in my mind is what makes separates a funny person from a comedian. Because comedian, like Hassan Minhaj has clearly put a lot of thought and effort and time into his jokes. He knows the subject matter he wants to get across. He knows what he wants to talk about. And I know like for him, a big thing that he talks about is being like a Muslim, brown man growing up in America. I don't know if you've ever seen his Netflix special, Homecoming King.
Yes, amazing.
It's so good.
Brilliant.
Even
have you seen it, Lia?
Yeah.
You have?
Oh, no, I haven't seen that yet. No.
Oh, well, you should check it out. It is so good. So good. But like, I have seen it over and over again because what he talks about in that like Homecoming King is like, it's experiences I can relate to. It's things I will never be able to relate to. It's things that, you know, were maybe really only issues or like as prevalent of issues back when, you know, Islamophobia was probably at its peak, but it's all so intense. Like if he were to just speak on that like very bluntly, I think I would just freak out. I'd be like, oh my God, this is terrible. This is horrible. I'm so sorry for you. But you watch that and you laugh and you get something out of it. You know, you really start to think. And that's just what I like applaud Hassan Minhaj for doing. And that's the type of comedian I want to be, because that's not easy. It is not easy to really resonate with your audience in a way and get them to start thinking about very important topics and world issues in a funny way. Like he's brilliant, and like definitely like my comedic idol would probably be Hassan Minhaj.
Hassan. Yay for Hassan. Lia, about you?
I have a different perspective about what kind of comedian, you know, I like or I want to be. One of the takeaway for my, you know, recent discovery about the comedy art is to be a successful comedian. The most important part is be yourself. I don't worship any comedian, even they are very successful and famous. And I feel guilty. I haven't got a chance to watch those, you know, famous comedians yet, but I'm not in a rush because I used to be a very serious person and position myself as a professional speaker. I want to change in the world. Even after I left, you know, a Toastmaster, I forced myself to relearn a lot of these styles, you know, facial expression, body language. You are not natural because real people don't talk like that, right? So for me, what kind of comedian I want to become is I just want to talk about what I'm passionate about, what I'm interested in. For me right now, and I care about my family, so I talk about my husband, I talk about my daughter, and I talk about, you know, our, you know, wrinkles, aging without wrinkles, things that make me happy. I just want to relax and slow down and talk about what's matter in my heart. And for those politics things, if it's related to China and the US, I might touch a little bit, but I'm not a person where purposely pay attention to those, what happened in the news. I'm not that kind of person because we happened to have a conversation with my husband because my husband was in my show yesterday, being a camera. He supported me, but not in a willing way because he knows it's so hard for you to want to do speaking professionally, you know, to make a living. For comedian, that's even harder. And I'm a little bit different than, you know, Shruthi, and I'm a first generation immigrant. And English is my second language, right? So just learning ABC is enough. Then you try to make people laughing. So,
yeah.
But you know, I think, like I said earlier, we share more things in common than our differences. As long as we touch what matters to you, sincerity, you know, what's who you are. People want to hear about your personal story. They said comedy is the art of tragedy. You know, you mentioned something earlier to that. You don't have to be miserable because a lot of comedians talk about their beat up life, they live a homeless life, that kind of stuff. That's not what presenting myself. I just want to share with people my piece of the world, how I see the world and express in my own way. Whether I become famous or, you know, rich or not, that's not important. Luckily, I don't need that to pay the bills, right? I just want to be who I am, make people laugh. And yesterday, it was the first time, like I said, I invited my Chinese friend to my show. That's my first time speaking for 10 years. I was able to put my Chinese banana friends and my non-banana friends under the same roof, laughing together for a good cause, which we raise money for St. Jude Children's Hospital. Wonderful. So that's my take where I want to go as a comedian.
Well, congratulations, Lia. I think that's excellent.
That is amazing. No, like, you know, you saying that, like, you know, I want to be my own comedian. I don't want to, like, you know, be necessarily like someone else. Like, good for you. And also you saying that, like, the whole, like, how I was saying humor comes from a dark place, or like, you know, comedy is the art of tragedy. And you're like, not for me. Like, I just want to share my life in a funny way. Like, that is such a positive look on it, and such like a positive outlook. I love that. That was a really, really good response.
And the difference is, we are two generations, me and Shruthi, right? It's so beautiful. Shruthi. I'm still trying to get that together. And my daughter is 16, so I look at you. I almost feel like I'm looking at my beautiful daughter the same way. Is I want to share with the world, my tragedy, if any, is my career is a mess. Okay, I started as an engineer, and now I'm trying to make a living by telling jokes. That's not even funny. Mm-hmm. But as a first generation immigrant, we went through a lot. But I was amazed. If you talk about who you are, share the truth of life, you can still make people who are not the typical, customer laughing with you. And that's the magic of comedy. And after I left Toastmaster, I found that comedy is more a down-to-earth entertainment. If I do my keynote speech about diversity, communication, there's no way I can bring everyone I invited last night to the same, location. Mm-hmm. So comedy united us. That's the magic.
Oh yeah.
Lia, you might need to explain the term banana for any listeners or viewers who are like, did she just call her friends banana?
I was going to say something, but I was like, I'm just gonna let it slide.
Yeah, no.
Did you watch the movie Crazy Rich Asian?
I didn't.
Okay.
I've seen bits and pieces.
That was the movie, very popular back in 2018. It was about Rachel, American Chinese, raised by a single mother, a Chinese, and her love story with her boyfriend Nick. Nick came from a crazy rich family in Singapore. So Nick's mother rejects Rachel because she was not rich, and her mother was single. All those BS. So Rachel's mother, a single mother, told Rachel, "You are not a typical Chinese. You are banana, yellow on the outside, white on the inside."
There's like a word for that for brown people who are like that. It's coconuts, like brown on the outside, white on the inside.
Yeah.
When you're black, we call that Oreo.
Okay.
So apparently, fruits
different foods for different cultures.
Yeah, fruits and foods.
Self-joke. Yeah.
Fascinating. All right, so banana, coconut, and Oreo cookies.
Like in my daughter's generation, she's a typical banana. I'm a first generation. I'm probably yellow on the outside, yellow on the inside, right? But she's pretty much yellow on the outside, white inside. How she feels about herself.
What was the last time the two of you laughed so hard you cried?
Oh,
and
me?
What made you laugh?
It was actually probably last night. I was hanging out with a couple friends, and we were just sitting in my bedroom, and I honestly don't know, the conversation was so weird. Like, we were talking about just like boys and school and what we want to do with our lives, and it was like three of us. My one friend is talking about I just can't wait to do this with my life. My other friend is sitting there and she's like, this boy is just so cute. And I'm sitting over here being like, I don't know. Oh, I was making spinach artichoke dip. So I'm over here talking. Yeah, no. I was just making dip. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking about this dip. None of us, no one's listening to us. Nothing's happening. It's just life, boys, and dip. And I pause and I'm like, are you guys listening to me? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, okay, because I'm listening to you. None of us are on the same conversation. The timer goes off. I'm like, I'm going to go make this dip. And I bring the dip back. And then we're like, it is 2 a.m, Shruthi. We are having, it's so late at night. And we're having just the worst conversation. No one is talking about the same thing. And we're just eating spinach artichoke dip. That whole thing was so funny to us.
I just love it. I want to hear Lia's example in a second, but I just love the fact that something can make someone laugh so hard that the borderline, have to burst into tears because there's no more emotional range other than just expressing in tears. And as you're sharing it, 'cause it's happened to me before. I've done, silly things sometimes that have made me laugh. and I'm trying to tell somebody and they're like, that's not even funny.
Yeah, no, they're gonna be like, that was not a funny story. She'll be like, what's happening? And I'm like, I can't even explain this. Like,
you don't have to explain it.
I gave you the honest answer. It was last night.
I get it.
I was eating dip and laughing my like head off. Like, it was so funny. Like, you had to have been there. And I'm like trying to think, like, how can I explain this? But I can't explain this without talking about my friend's like life and like, the context was funny. I promise you, it was really funny.
I believe you. I do. Like everybody else. I tried telling my mom some of the jokes that Trevor said that just made me laugh. Like how, like I was sweating by the time I was done with this bit, and I was like, oh my God, my eyes are funny. And she's like, oh. I'm like, oh. Anyway, you had to be there, I guess. Lia, what about for you? When was the last time you laughed so hard you cried? Or close?
I don't remember I had that experience recently. And it's funny, when you focus on develop your own comedy bits, you start to look at life in a different, with a different attitude. And I think right now is when I see something happen in front of me, I just record them in my iPhone. And when I'm done and when I have time, I sit down, I go back to polish that. And one small experience was right now I'm doing a 1 minute story and I try to develop a punchline, by the end of the 1 minute. And one of the example was, and my husband and I, we went to Lake Lavang with a friend, George, and his daughter, Mia. And so when we got there, it was during the summer. And I put the mesh cover to protect the food from flies. And of course, remind everyone to put mosquito repellent on, right? Mia, a college student, like your age, asked me, what are the difference between mosquito and the flies? I was amazed with the question. I said, what kind of question is that? How can I answer that? So I thought it. I said, okay, Mia, sweetheart, flies, okay, mosquito bite you. Flies kiss you.
That's a good answer.
A really good answer.
Yeah. So I think I'm in a very subtle way collect the information and kind of put them into my treasure hunt box. And I don't necessarily laugh at my punchline, but when you deliver your punchline, the same thing, you don't laugh on your punchline. And you want the audience to laugh for you. So to answer your question, I don't remember you really laughing very hard or to the tears. Maybe when I watch a movie. Yeah, so
that's so funny.
I think the perfect answer.
I think those are all fine. Again, humor is so subjective. And sometimes things hit us one way because we were in a certain kind of mood. I don't know. Maybe I would have thought Hassan was much funnier than I really thought in many ways that Trevor was, but I laughed so hard at Trevor that I was just like exhausted from laughing. Right? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I was in a more serious mood or whatever. But I think humor is so subjective.
I think for me to get to the point where I'm like crying from laughing is like, it's like everyone has to be in that same energy. I think like last night, that's why it was so funny, because I wasn't the only one that was cry laughing. My friends were also cry laughing. So like, even though the story itself like isn't that funny, like even thinking about it, the reason I started laughing again was because I was like there and I'm like reimagining what happened last night, and it was just really funny to me. But I can't think of like a specific joke that's made me cry laugh. Like there's nothing that's like that one thing one person said, I just lost it. It was like, it's always just the situation. It's the company. The company makes like a make or break for me.
It's the energy and the environment. That's what
exactly. Like
as a speaker, and if you have the ability to make your audience laugh, cry, and think, you have done your job.
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
It's not
just
easy.
What you said. Like I think that's the type of like speaker and comedian I want to be. Like I want my audience to like laugh, but I want them to also seriously think about that. Like what I'm.
You want to make a point, right? Yeah.
I very much like. I believe in using humor to make a point and to get your ideas out there. Like I think that's one of my strong suits is that I can use humor to do that.
Yeah.
Just
in that way, be free. Do not define yourself as a comedian or speaker, and just watch how you grow. You
Oh,
never know,
absolutely,
you'll
yeah.
surprise you. Say, hey, on my business card, and I didn't use comedian because I talk with my mentor. I have speaker, author, and humorist.
Mhm.
So I actually for a long time, like, if people ask me, like, I would talk about comedy and people were like, oh, you're a comedian, and I'm like, no, I just like doing comedy. I like doing stand-up. Oh,
There it is.
oh, nice with humor.
Love it.
Yeah,
I'll
like,
make sure to
Because
put your website.
title
in
is
the
title.
show
You can do
notes.
anything you want.
yeah, but very recently I would just like tell people, like, yeah, I do stand-up, like I'm a stand-up comedian, and people like are like, and that was like a huge step for me, because do I feel like I'm a stand-up comedian? No. But I feel like if I start saying that, sort of like manifest it into my life a little bit. Like if I say it, it has to happen type of thing. So I've started telling people I'm a stand-up comedian, and it's always followed by, tell me a joke. And I'm like, no, this is not
That's
how
not how it works.
It's not. And I'm like, shut up. Don't tell me to tell you a joke. Like,
Joke is different than comedy. Yeah. That's just what I learned after I left Toastmaster.
Not how it works.
yeah.
I want to. So, have either of you done any improv?
Yes. I was a cool kid in high school, I'll have you know. I was on the improv team.
Wow.
Lean.
Okay.
So many friends.
And have you done anything recently?
I think I might be I'm like trying to take an improv class like at my university.
Okay.
But
Lia,
yeah, there are some comedy club doing that. I haven't done anything after I left Toastmaster. So we were doing improv, doing the table topics. That's similar to improv, but without purpose of being funny, right?
That's one of the what I found, and as you guys are talking about what's funny and what makes one laugh, what I'm finding is the looser and the less time we have to think and prepare something, the easier the access is to humor, right? Yeah. Because sometimes when we're analyzing and we want to say things in the right way, or we have a plan of how we want to go about whatever, we sometimes miss the openings. And the improv classes that I've taken are all, I remember this as particular exercise. My brother and sister-in-law and I went to an improv class recently, and we had to set up scenes. There were probably like 25 of us in the room, and the instructor would want us to set up a scene of some sort. Basically, you'd have two people in the middle and they'd do something, and then a third person would have to walk in and, based on their body language or posture, would change the significance or the meaning of the scene. And there was a point where people would come in, at random. So whoever had an idea would go and do something in the middle. But you'd see the same people over and over again after a few turns. So then the instructor stopped us and he said, okay, whereas you notice that when you have the opportunity to do it randomly, we have the same people come up because you have an idea and then you want to go try out your idea. But those that were thinking about, well, no, how do I do it? What if I do? No, they were thinking, they weren't jumping in. So then he said, now we're going to make everybody go in order. And so in the circle we were in, he would just go one by one. All right, these two go in first, and then the third person does the scene. And when you had to do it first, you couldn't anticipate what the two people before you were going to set up. So you just had to be in the moment and just do whatever, right? Really be present. And it was a beautiful exercise in understanding that just having to jump into something actually gave us so much more freedom. Whereas when we had to think and plan and we had time to calculate, sometimes we'd hold ourselves back, or we'd miss the window and miss the opportunity. So that was a huge lesson. And I highly recommend anyone that's interested in just freeing up themselves even more, an improvisational class is like the difference. So now I want to pivot our conversation as we begin to wrap things up for this podcast, because I want to zoom out. We've been talking about humor and how that's played a role in your life, but I'm now curious about this experience. This experience being on a podcast with somebody you barely know is kind of improvisational. So I'm curious about, what was your experience like? What would you say about this experience now after this hour that we've been talking?
I'm going to be honest. this is a good thing. I expected it to be a lot more funny. Like I expected it to be just us making jokes the entire time. But I'm like actually very pleased with like the conversation we had, and like, you know, really seeing the similarities between me and Lia, and also seeing, you know, the differences between us as people, and but still again having that core, like, you know, what's it called, that bridge between us that's like humor and comedy and all, you know. I had a great time.
Cool. Lia?
Well, you know, I'm pretty impressed how professional you are running this podcast, right? The way you have us signed up and, you know, have us ready and arrange this, you know, the date and the time, you know, from a month ago. So to me, it's pretty formal. Right? Feel like I'm doing an interview with NBC.
Ding, ding, ding. And but what was it like meeting Shruthi and having this conversation about humor?
What was your question again?
Yeah, what was it like meeting Shruthi and having this conversation about humor? Can you hear me?
I didn't get the question, to be honest with you. Are you talking English?
All right, got it. So
no, I'm in a different way. Okay.
I'm curious about your experience, Lia. I get that there's a sense of formality, right? Because we are having a kind of a structured interaction. But I'm curious about your experience in the conversation about humor, meeting Shruthi and having this conversation with her for the first time.
Okay.
What was that like?
Oh, you know, like I said, you know, when I look at her, I say, what a beautiful young lady. And I'm thinking about, I'm meeting with the older version of my daughter.
Oh, thank you.
And you are funny, you are beautiful, and keep being funny. And doesn't matter what you do in the future, if you have the ability to make people laugh, do it. If one day you become famous, you know, to perform at the, you know, American Center, go for it. The sky's your limit.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yay. 2 last questions. Number 1, what are you taking away from this conversation? Either an idea or maybe a reinforcement of something that you already thought. What are you taking away?
I'm taking away actually, like, and I've been thinking about this like in the back of my head since Lia said it, but you know, she was saying how like she doesn't aim to be like any other comedian. She just wants to be her own one. And I definitely have like in my mind been like, oh, but I want to be like similar to Hassan Minaj, and I want to be kind of like John Mulaney, and I want to be like Bo Burnham, but like now I'm like, but I could just be me. I could just do me, you know. I don't have to follow a certain track.
You are the best of who you are. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. That's been like the back of my mind.
Best version of yourself is you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the best comedian, you know, if you really dig into them, they are not shy to be themselves. Even they talk about the dark side of their lives. Only confident person can become the comedian because they're not afraid to make fun to themselves.
100%.
Yeah.
Lia, what about for you?
What was the question again? I'm bad.
What are you taking away from this experience and from this conversation? Either something new that you've learned or you've been opened up to, or perhaps something that's reinforced for yourself.
I'm so glad, you know, and the topic of this conversation, because like you, Valerie, and I have a mission to really, you know, reach out to people who are different from me. And today I reach out to a different, beautiful young lady, and we have something in common. Even we are at a different stage of our life, but I believe that no matter what we do, our sense of humor can really add value to the people around us. So that's my takeaway. So I'm glad I find someone has some similarity, have a similar mission at a different stage of our life.
100%. Love that. And then the very final last question is, what would you like to say to the audience who might be listening, either about where to find you or what you're up to, or something that you want to, some words of wisdom, final words for the audience?
Ooh, that's pretty big.
Yeah.
Don't take yourself so seriously, Lia.
Drop like my TikTok handle.
Yes. Like... If you send it to me, I'll make sure that I include it in the show notes. So I'm happy to send your TikTok handle or website or anything you guys like. Anything you'd like to say to the audience? Final word? or to each other.
It was great meeting you. And to anybody watching, I promise that story about last night with the spinach artichoke dip was actually funny. You just had to be there.
We'll believe
I promise. That's it.
I'm so glad to be here. I'm Lia Bai, a Texas cowgirl made in China.
And I'm Shruthi Garimalla, manufactured in America.
Look, the two of you guys have been absolutely lovely. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, sharing your lessons learned, both hard and easy, but also being so open to exchanging ideas with each other and with me. I think, yes, it's evident that all three of us have completely different perspectives on things, but I think, again, it really proves the point that it's made a very interesting conversation to have, just hearing different takes, different experiences, different learnings, different resources. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do out there in the world, because I think, gosh, we could all use more humor. We could all use a place to lighten up in life. And we need a shepherd, we need a guide to get us there. And I think the two of you are doing that in your own special way. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, now you can have your pie. You have earned your pie today. Pia pie. All right, everyone that's been tuning in, thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of Not Quite Strangers. You'll be hearing where you can connect with us by going to notquitestrangers.com and subscribing to any future episodes, so you get them straight into your inbox. And I'm looking forward to the two ladies doing some amazing things. So keep an eye out for any billboards out there with their names on it. All right, everybody, have a wonderful rest of the day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
You've been listening to the podcast Not Quite Strangers. Be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite video or podcast platform. And for more information and content, go to notquitestrangers.com. See you next time.